This episode is brought to you by the Your Next Chapter Business Club. It provides community, resources, coaching, and training for women in business. In fact, everything you need so you can confidently grow you and your business each and every month. The club is now open and I would love to welcome you in. You can find out more details at angelarasmus.com/club. Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast. This is Angela Rasmus, and you have joined us in our new season, which is all about purpose, passion, and reinvention in business and life. I'm having wonderfully wholehearted conversations with women who are stepping out in new directions with courage and with curiosity. And I'm hugely excited that today I get to have that conversation and share it with you with a very, very dear friend who I find an inspiration with the way that she has stepped into her purpose closer and closer, not once, not twice, but several times. It's the lovely Carolyn Tate, who describes herself as an author, an educator on bringing your purpose to work and a business as well. Carolyn, my darling, I'm so pleased that you're here with me today.
Thanks, Ange, for having me. Very excited to be chatting.
It's one of those conversations that you and I have had over the years, many discussions around this topic, but I remember when I first picked up your Purpose Project book, which I've got right in front of me right now, which has got a byline of a handbook for bringing meaning to life at work. And as I was showing you just before we started this recording, I've got highlights all through this book because so much of it really resonates and rings true for me in terms of how we can go and start to uncover and enrich our own purpose in business and work and in life. But I thought what would be a great place to start was to really hear about your own journey into purpose, because goodness knows there's been several chapters in the past and there's more chapters to come. But could you give us a little bit of a précis about how you have moved closer to your own purpose, my darling?
Yeah, I'd love to. So when I left high school many moons ago, I fell into banking. It wasn't a career that I chose, and I ended up spending 20 years in it, by the way. And then I had some changes in my life. I got divorced. I had a 3-year-old at the time. My son, I moved house with him, and then I decided that I was going to change my career as well. So I gave up my corporate job and started my own business. And I think it was that point in time that I first started thinking about the big question of what is the work that I'm meant to be doing? Am I happy doing the work that I was doing in marketing in the corporate world in banking? What would that look like? So I would say I started my adventure and exploration around purpose and meaningful work 16 or 17 years ago. And so what I did when I moved from corporate world to my own business, I became a marketing consultant, and I started writing blogs and newsletters and doing all sorts of marketing workshops and so on. And in that process, I guess moving closer and closer to what I really love. But in 2010, so after 9 years of being in business, I really had fallen out of love with marketing as a profession. I was questioning the value of marketing. Was it making a difference? Is it really a profession that I want to continue in? And so I gave everything up. I sold my house, closed the business, got rid of an old messy love affair, and I took my son, Billy, who was 12 at the time, to live in France for 6 months. So we lived in Aix-en-Provence. That was late 2010. But that was the moment where I started to go a lot more deeper on why am I here, what's the contribution I want to make with my work, what is most meaningful to me, asking all those questions. And it's really been the last 7 years that I would say that I've gone a lot deeper on my own purpose adventure. And I wrote the Purpose Project as the roadmap that I guess I wish I'd had in 2010 when I first seriously started to explore it. And I took on lots and lots of projects because I believe that we don't find our why or our purpose at work. We actually build it and we create it. And we're actually already born with it. It's just that it's been latent, or it's been untapped or squashed by the education system or our parents or whatever. So it was a chance for me to take on lots of projects to really explore what it is I am here to do. And I'm just getting closer and closer and closer to that all the time. So yeah, that's my journey.
I love that description about how we actually create and build our purpose, and I believe adding to that we uncover it as opposed to discovering it. And one of the words that really rang true to me when I was reading the Purpose Project was this concept of inspiration, which was your made-up word, which made a lot of sense to me. Can you talk a little bit to what that means and how that impacts us when we're looking for purpose?
Yeah, so I forget the exact definition that I use of what inspiration is, but it really is about inspired action. And I think action always precedes clarity of purpose. It's not until you feel into the doing of something that you actually feel whether it's the right thing to be doing or not. So inspired action means that the action you're taking is actually inspired from a place of real deep spiritual, because inspired is in spirit, so it comes from a spiritual place. And many of us can go about our lives feeling inspired but not actually taking action, and that's kind of pointless. You might as well not have the inspiration if you're not going to take action with it. And then on the other side, many of us take action, but it's not necessarily inspired or in spirit, and that action then becomes the wrong action. So inspiration to me is the combination of taking inspired action.
I loved that. It made sense to me when I was reading it, and the concept, and I think this is really reassuring for a lot of us, is that it doesn't become obvious when we first get started. I mean, I think when we look back with hindsight, we can see how the different steps that we took or the different paths that we chose have brought us to where we are today, and we could have ended up somewhere very different, but we're being guided, and here we are. But that it's never set in stone, that we can continue with that inspiration type approach and see where it leads us. But we've really got to listen to our hearts and our gut in those instances, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely we do. On the other side of that, what I've learned over the last 7 years is this word commitment. I think quite often we give up when it gets too painful and actually, or too hard, or it feels like this isn't working. And what I've been learning is that you just need to keep showing up and busting through the pain and the obstacles, because they're there for a reason, to test whether you're on the right path or not. And that's probably been my biggest fault, and I'll be very personal and honest here. My biggest fault in not really achieving success in some projects and things that I've worked on is that I've not had the commitment to see it through when the going has got tough. And I have run away from the pain of it instead of actually busting through it where the greatest opportunity and growth is. So it's one thing to take inspired action, and I think the other thing in life is we can be curious about so many things and take on so many projects and ideas, and we have what I call multiple possibility disorder or bright shiny object disorder, which means that we're forever ineffective because we're not really laser focused, sharp, committed, sustainable, go down the path. Even if it ends up being the wrong path, it's still an important component of achieving success, I think. And now I've learnt that for myself, probably really through some of the projects that I've abandoned rather than seeing them through, which I sort of regret, but also I guess not seeing them through has led me to where I am today. But I think that commitment word is the other side almost of taking the inspired action, is to remain committed. That's what I've learned from there.
Oh, I think I can relate to that one. And with it, it's actually funny. I was at training this morning with the personal trainer that I've taken on, and we were talking about the exact subject of commitment, of when you've decided this is the goal, this is the path, this is where I want to go. I'm being inspired, I'm being pulled. But when the going gets tough, I think sometimes we can interpret that as, oh, well, maybe this isn't meant to be. Yeah. And there is that dance that we need to take of, that two-step shuffle of, is it that I'm being tested to check my commitment and I need to push through? Or is it that I'm getting all this resistance, and so that indicates to me that this is not the path because it's not flowing? I mean, there seems to be debate on both sides of the table. How do you feel about that? How have you felt that you can make that judgment call as to whether this is I need to push or I need to let go?
It's the same in relationships too, Ange, whether that's romantic relationship or family or friends. How do you choose between whether you go ahead, whether you continue or not? Look, I don't really know the answer. Every situation has been different. I think it's about really being able to rise above the content of the situation and bring yourself back to the context and also to the reason you're doing what you're doing and what it is you want to achieve. And I think it's the how that kills us. And the how actually can happen in many, many ways. If you know what it is you want to achieve and why you want to achieve it, this is what works for me. I try to use I instead of you. When I know what I want and when I know why I want it, I am a little more fluid with the how and not so dogged, but I still am keeping on that path, if that makes sense.
I think that part there, or rather I should say I feel that part there is the key. It's that if we're connected to a why that is connected in our heart, like something that we truly believe in, that feels resonant, that feels important to us, the impact, the change that we want to champion, then when the going gets tough, we can deal with that because the outcome, the goal, the vision is so connected and important to us. I think I loved in your book in particular that you looked at the defining of purpose. And if I can just read this because I really love it. Purpose is all about living and working at the intersection of your talents and passion in service to yourself and the greater good. So if we can find that sweet spot, then that is what can pull us forward rather than push us through. I think that's the distinction that I use. It's being pulled forward rather than pushed through. So you can deal with the crap that life throws at you, the challenges, because that destination, which is ever expanding, that you're moving towards, is worth it. So you had I love how you broke this down, these essential elements to the definition of purpose that, again, I could really relate to, and I'm sure any woman listening will be able to as well. So I'll just go through this and then get your comments on how this has showed up for you. So there's that intention to accomplish something. So that's the first piece, like it's a path or a goal or a project. And then secondly, it's got to be meaningful to us. So we've got to feel really connected to it and passionate about it because it helps us reach our potential. Doesn't matter anyone else's opinions, it's what's connected for us. And then that third piece is consequential for the world because there's that service component feels absolutely essential in purpose. So that it goes beyond just what we are trying to achieve. It has an impact in some small, medium, or large way on the world. So those three components, like they fitted in so beautifully into the purpose puzzle. How did that come about for you? Like recognizing that those were the elements of purpose that really rung true.
So it's come out in my life, in my work life. My highest purpose, by the way, is to write books that truly matter to me and to my readers.
Well, you can tick that box, Madonna, because this book is definitely mattering to me.
Thank you. And it's my 5th book, and I'm currently writing my 6th book. And the beauty about books are that they are about projects. They're a series of projects. So my first project was to write the book, the manuscript. The second project is to publish it. The third one is to market it. So it's a series of projects. And I know that books are that is my purpose, because I keep going back to it and I keep thinking about the next book. And so it is about accomplishing something. I need to put my work out into the world, and there's a lot of this perfectionism is the enemy of execution. I think I went to a writer's course on the weekend and I left feeling really frustrated because there was a lot of talk about what if you get it wrong, and it should be based on academic research, and there was a whole lot of dialogue around it, which really annoyed me, because I'm kind of like, what is wrong anyway? It's a very subjective concept. And two, even if you get it wrong and it creates positive dialogue, then isn't that better than just sitting on your work and not putting it out there anyway? So I'm a bit of a gung-ho kind of person. I just put my stuff out there, and then you almost have to not care what other people think. And I know that sounds a bit careless and ruthless, but it's something that I see that prevents women in stepping forward, is this desire to want to be liked by everybody, to please everybody, to not put their work out to the world because of potential for criticism, that it's not going to be seen as perfect. And I've gone totally off-piste with this question, Anne.
actually, I don't think you have. If I can pick up the thread.
but I think for me, it's just been this relentless commitment to put my stuff out there. And Gloria Steinem once said that writing is the only thing that when I do it, I don't feel like I should be doing something else. And often I'll speak to people and I say, what's the word you'd replace for writing? And I'm just very, very fortunate that writing is something that I can't not do. You know, I journal for 3 pages every morning. I write poems on my iPhone while I'm waiting in the airport queue. You know, I write a blog on a trip from Brisbane to Melbourne on the plane. I'm constantly thinking about the plot of my next book and journaling about it, and it's sort of like an obsession for me, and I feel like it's my anchor as well. So as life throws at you the inevitable ups and downs and tragedies and hard times, writing for me is my anchor, and it's the thing that I come back to that keeps me grounded. And so I'm just very fortunate that I'm not fortunate. I'm fortunate that I've created it and found that by doing, I'm getting more and more clarity around it. And that's the accomplished bit. It is about accomplishing something and putting our work out into the world. And it is meaningful to me because it makes use of my talents and my skills and my experience and all of those sorts of things. And it's consequential because I will always choose a subject that I feel is going to be of value to my readers and of value to me, something that I want to share that I've experienced myself that I feel would be helpful to somebody else as well. Even if it changes one other person's life or direction, then I feel like I've, made a difference.
And that was when you were talking about, I've got, of course, not at all, because what I was hearing, and I think it's really important to highlight, is that writing's the thing that never goes away. It keeps calling you. You keep returning to it. You keep thinking about it. You keep taking action on it. And I've felt, certainly in my development over the years and working with clients, that if there is that thing that keeps turning up, you need to have a good look at it and then start to explore it and start to use those 3 pieces you were just talking about. And then the second core point that you made about not being tied to what other people are thinking. That is, I think that one's huge. This whole needing or wanting or being afraid of the disapproval, wanting the approval, being somewhat afraid of the disapproval. It's what keeps us, to use your expression, we can't just think about it, because that's where most of us remain stuck. We've got to take action on it. And that's where I think that if that purpose piece has that real meaningful connection, then taking action on it is not quite so scary, because it feels so needed, so important, so connected to us. Actually taking action is the purposeful piece because
Yeah.
we can't let it just stay quiet. And it seems that as you take that action, that's when more layers start to get peeled off.
Mm.
More layers become real.
Yeah. Oscar Wilde said the riskiest thing in life is taking no risks at all. I feel like that about action.
And the scariest moment is just before you start.
Absolutely. And but it's riskier not to do anything. It's riskier to stay in the status quo than it is to try something and fail. And I don't believe in the word failure. I believe that that it's more, if you think of things as an experiment, an adventure, a test, a prototype, a project, it takes away the seriousness if it does fail, and reframing what success is. And success to me is doing something, doing anything, much more preferable to doing nothing.
I love the concept of that, because we'll either succeed or we'll learn. I mean, those are our options. We will succeed and we will learn from that, or we will not succeed and we will learn from that.
Absolutely.
But we can't learn from inaction. That will just keep us smaller. I love some of the work that I've done is with the concept of ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. And Russ Harris talks very much about that the actions of confidence come first, the feelings of confidence come later. So we've got to screw up our courage and just take a leap. That's for sure. I think being in community certainly helps that. Like you identify as being a writer. So being in a writer's community of some type is probably helpful. But what role does community play in you fulfilling your purpose?
Good question. Well, I've run community quite a lot in the past. The Slow School of Business. I started Conscious Capitalism Community. I started Connect Network in Melbourne and in Sydney originally, where I first met you many moons ago. And
I remember meeting you at the State Library.
Yeah, and community has always been important to me. It's almost been my quasi-family. I guess I've never lived in the same city as my family ever. So community in a little way, and I've lived in a number of places, so community's always been really important to me. And I think it's a natural inclination to want to belong to like-minded community. And also as a business person, you're not in a business work world corporate community where you turn up to work every day and you've got 20 co-workers sitting next to you. When you work for yourself, it's a very lonely journey very often. And so most business people will find that the support of a community of like-minded entrepreneurs or whatever will be imperative to help in terms of collaboration and in terms of support and advice and all sorts of things. And they can be a distraction on the other side of community, just to be very honest. Sometimes you can, I have my findings about being in community is that I have overgiven very often, and I think it's a pretty female thing that we're givers generally, and we can find ourselves depleted by that if it's not getting any financial return. So there's a big balance, and the word community kind of lends itself to not-for-profit, volunteering, not making money, like there's a lens around it which probably needs to be reframed. But community is really important in many aspects of our lives, and it's also for women particularly, I feel, important that we set boundaries around how we work within and around and in community.
I think that's a really important point to make, and those boundaries, being aware that if we have a tendency to be a giver, and if we have a tendency not to have those boundaries, which suggests that there needs to be a giver and a receiver in any situation, and if you are always the giver and never the receiver, then it's out of balance. It's very much out of balance. So a piece of purpose is to be is to be supported, and as you said, to collaborate. That can certainly be a great part of our purposeful journey, but to make sure that we don't get burnt out along the way or get stagnated, because there is nothing but the give and never the receive.
Yeah.
It's really important to look at both sides of it. Thank you for that. And actually, that made me remember another piece that you mentioned about finding the work that completes us rather than depletes us. I thought that was a really a great contrast there, because I think there's no doubt that when, like, being a business isn't easy. It's not easy. We hear stories all the time of businesses that are collapsing, that are folding, that people have chosen to walk away from, etc. It's not easy, but it can also be a lot easier if the work that we are doing does feel as though it's completing us rather than depleting us. So is that, like, there's different pieces to this, I guess. There's the physical component of the stress and the hours that we're putting in. But what does it feel like for work that completes you? How do you describe and feel that, so we can know that we're on the right path, shall we say, for us?
Yeah. Well, majority of workers, I say, are making a dying at work instead of a living. It's ironic that we say I'm going to work today to make a living, and Gallup shows that 87% of the world's workers are either not engaged or actively disengaged at work.
Yeah.
So, and I think there's two reasons for that. One, it's because of the nature of the work, but also it's because of the nature of the attitude upon which your work is approached. So every job has we can find a purpose within the work that we're doing now, and that often is the attitude and the frame of mind that we approach our work. So when I say work that completes us, it's work that we enjoy doing to a degree, but also how we turn up at work in terms of our mind and our mindset. Also, to extend on that, I think that when I talk about purpose in my book, I talk about organizational purpose and personal purpose. And when an organization or a company has a bigger purpose than making profit, and employees can be connected to that bigger purpose, then that gives them a reason to turn up to work regardless of what their role or job is day in and day out. So I think we can do work that completes us if we feel like we are making an impact in the world with the company that we're working for. So we're working for a purpose-driven organisation. And then in terms of our role, I think there's two levels that we can bring our own why to work within our role. So if you're a parking attendant working at a car park in a toll booth, for example, you could make your role purpose to brighten the lives of every single driver that enters the car park, for example. So you might be physically taking money and adding your cash up at the end of the day, but if you also made it your intention to bring some joy to the thousands of people that come through your car park every day, then that gives your work purpose. And
wouldn't that change your energy completely?
Absolutely.
If you think about it in that way, so contribution, that's what I feel that we're talking about here, is that feeling of being valuable, of being useful, of making a contribution, that if we can harness that type of energy, it really does change our state. It changes our mindset, it changes our attitude, it changes everything. I love the idea of bringing purpose into every situation.
And also, Ange, it's when you take it home too, that actually goes back into the work, back home. But there's even another bigger, deeper, richer level, which I've been exploring with corporations and employees, and which I think is really exciting. What if that same car parking attendant is an amazing singer and has this passion or desire to be on Australian Idol or The Voice or something? If that car parking attendant was actually working on a project to make that happen outside of life, outside of his day-to-day work, if he works in an empathetic, empowering organisation where employers truly, truly want their people to reach their truest and highest potential, then he can also bring that extra thing that he's doing that would be traditionally outside of work somehow into the workplace and be nurtured to be a full person by the people that are paying him day in and day out. It's a pretty edgy concept, and I think corporates are now starting to realise with automation and artificial intelligence and the nature of work is truly, truly changing, that people have these latent skills, talents and purposes that they're not actually being able to bring to work. So companies are going to have to start thinking about, how do I repurpose and redeploy people? But it's not going to be up to the leaders to do that. It's going to be the self-leaders in organisations that say, you know what, I am a brilliant writer or an artist or a creator of some sort. I want to bring that talent to work in some way. So we're going to see a shift where employees are going to start to become purpose activists within their organisations and look to create opportunity for their purpose in the organisation.
Well, what we're talking about there, which makes perfect sense to me, is, as you were talking about the Gallup poll earlier about the lack of engagement in work, it's almost like you put on this suit, this hat, okay, I'm in work mode now. And I can't bring the whole of me to work because that's sort of frowned on. I mean, this is about not compartmentalizing our lives, allowing more fluidity across the different roles. I mean, I know one of the things that I really appreciate in being an entrepreneur and having my own business is that there isn't, okay, I am now in work mode. Okay, now I'm in mum mode. Okay, now I'm in family mode, whatever. There is a fluidity across all of those roles. I bring all of me to every role. Perhaps there's some part of my skill set that is more utilized in one area than another, but I haven't compartmentalized myself. And so you get the whole of me, whether you're in a mastermind with me, you're on a retreat, you're listening to a podcast, whatever the case, I am me. But if I was in corporate land, there has been that more of an approach of what behaviours and what purposes are encouraged because they're seen as more connected to the business. I love this idea of allowing you to bring the whole of you to work, because then I can see that you would flourish because you're not just labelled and restricted. So it can do. I can see there may be a gap between an organisation seeing the value in that, but if they can lift to their higher perspective and see how that could really bring out the best in an employee and a team member, then my goodness, it is definitely worth exploring.
Yeah, I believe it's the new frontier of purpose. In what I've observed in terms of the trends around organisations shifting to purpose globally. Purpose is the word on many leaders' lips around the globe, and I think we're at a kind of tipping point where leaders are realising that if they don't shift their organisation towards a higher purpose, they're not going to be sustainable or profitable in the long run. So there is a shift in that, and I also think there is a shift in awareness of employees around who they want to work for. How they want to work, and the world of work is evolving on both ends, from the organisational end but from the employee end as well. And so we're going to see this beautiful melding of people just being aware of what it is they want and why they want it, most importantly, and being more forthright and more assertive in asking for what they want. And ensuring that what they're delivering and what they're doing actually is of value. You know, if what I'm doing is important to others, is, you know, the question, am I helping? I think there was some research last year that 95% of Australian brands wouldn't be missed by Aussies if they didn't exist. So,
it says a lot, doesn't it? It's like, so something that is an experience, a contribution rather than a commodity, be it product or service, is what we need to be aiming for.
And look, organisations are, you know, they're starting to address the situation of how can we actually solve world problems, not just customers' perceived problems, but how do we go beyond that to solve world problems? And the younger generation, the millennials and the younger generation, they're far, far more aware than my generation about what purpose is and why we need to be making an impact and starting businesses that are fixing world problems rather than creating them.
I love that with seeing my own teenagers and you with your Billy, of seeing how much more aware they seem to be and how much more aligned with doing good in terms of having a positive impact. Their behavior and the choices they make and the roles they move into is having a positive impact. I get hugely excited by looking at our kids that are coming through.
Yeah, I do too. I think they're going to, it's not fair that they have to change the world, but they're going to. It should be our generation. I also talk about the idea that we have multiple purposes. Like, I don't believe that we only have one purpose, and I believe that purpose does change over time as our values change and our beliefs change. But one of my purposes is to be a wicked role model for Billy, for myself.
I remember reading that, I think, in one of your blog posts or something, to be a wicked role model. I love that.
Yeah, and just to show, not tell. I think as parents, I've been guilty. As a parent, I've been very guilty in the past of advising. The last thing kids want is their parents' advice. And I think shifting from advising to showing is a far more effective way of parenting, and is only going to create the next generation of kids that are actually going to be purpose-driven and passionate about the world and resolving some of the really sad things that are going on in the world that need to be resolved.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to pick up just as we're continuing with this part of the conversation about the comment that you just made about having multiple purposes. We've touched on the concept, and I loved how you broke it down for a book as being the projects. There's the project of writing the book. There's the project of publishing the book. There's the project of marketing the book. So it's breaking it down in that respect. But underneath it all, I agree that we've got different ways of showing, of executing, of implementing our purpose. But I feel quite strongly that it comes back to a central tenet, like yours as a writer is to inspire and to educate. For example, if I was just going to use some of those words, you will show that in so many different ways. Like I remember when you wrote the Conscious Marketing Manifesto, and when you wrote Unstuck in Provence, and when you decided to burn down the business and go in a new direction, it came back, it felt, to that central tenet of really being so connected to your values, because they certainly inform our purpose. But you've always had that consistency of wanting to make that impact, of inspiring and educating. So when we say that we have multiple purposes, how do you feel that contrast from the way that I'm describing it here, in terms of underneath it we have like a drive, a central reason for being, so to speak, but it's expressed in different ways at different times? Are we singing from the same song sheet?
Yeah, so as I said, my highest purpose is to write books that truly matter. That's one of my purposes. I think writing is the thing that the subject matter changes, and writing is the thing that I'll always come back to. And what I tend to do with my writing is actually have a personal experience or research something or get myself embodied in something experientially, and then I write about it. Then my other purpose, obviously, as I've already said, is to be a wicked role model for Billy. I have a purpose for the Purpose Project. That's to unearth a higher purpose in people and organisations, and I'm focusing on doing that in partnership with a big company that's got impact and scalability. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think you're kind of asking the idea of having multiple purposes. And are you asking if that's okay, or if that's kind of like, have I answered your question?
It's more of, this is, I guess, more of a conversation rather than a specific question. It feels to me as though purpose, like the thing that we are here for, the thing that we are almost designed for in a way, is then expressed in multiple different ways throughout your life, depending on where you're at and what you're working on. But there's always connecting threads, is what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing. Like part of I see my main purpose, if I was going to drill right down to it, it's to boost the self-belief of every person that I come across. so that they have more confidence to do the thing in the world that they want to do. And that gets expressed in many different ways. That can be the blog posts that I write. It can be the podcast. It can be me speaking at a recovery group. It can be me running a mastermind. It runs in many different ways, but it always has those connecting threads.
Yeah,
I guess is what I'm sharing here. That's the perspective that I have.
Yeah, that's interesting. And if you look at that, to boost the say your purpose again, to boost.
It's to boost the self-belief. It's for every person that I come across to believe a little more in their ability to do the thing they want to do. So it's to encourage them, I guess, inspiration, if I can borrow your word.
Yeah. So it's really interesting that if you compare your purpose to mine, Ange, so yours is about an action oriented at supporting people. It's a subject matter. Mm-hmm. So self-belief is your subject, right?
Yes.
Yet the way you do that is through using various modalities, right? So yes. You'll do a podcast interview like we're doing, you'll write an article, you'll run a mentoring program, whatever. So you actually live that through various modalities. Whereas my purpose is writing books that truly matter. So my purpose is attached to my modality, but my subject matter changes. So it's gone from marketing to a memoir. My current book that I'm writing is a novel about feminist novel. The last one was about purpose. The next one I'm hoping is going to be around living in sustainable communities, which is what I'm about to move into, and I've bought in a very interesting community here in Melbourne. So my purpose is centered around what I can't not do, which is write. And I want to write a book of poems. I've started writing poetry. As I said, I journal, I write blogs. So I'm more focused on the craft, whereas your purpose seems focused on the subject.
That's a really...
it just came to me. I'm not sure if that even makes sense.
It does make sense, and that actually connects into place for me, because yes, it's whether or not you're leading with the craft itself, or you're leading with the subject or the experience or whatever it can be. And that's a really interesting distinction for people. And I think if we look back into and do a little bit of delving into the past, our purpose is often connected to an experience we've had that has heightened the value of the thing. So the self-belief piece for me is because of the struggles that I had as a teenager and an adult, of this lack of worthiness, this feeling that bubbled underneath everything. And knowing how that felt, and so really wanting to help other people move through that pain quicker and come out the other side. So that's experience driven. So
that's a very, very powerful insight, Ange. Very powerful that it is experience driven, and it's usually purpose is found in your past, and it does often come from some pain that's been experienced. So that's a really good insight. Whereas for me, like, I don't want to be known as the purpose queen for the rest of my life. Like, it's not something. I'm more interested in fine-tuning my craft of writing and writing on multiple subjects that end up being of interest to me. So if someone says, "What do you do?" that my first thing is, I'm an author.
I'm an author. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it feels in the season of your purpose, which is actually happens to be around purpose, where the next season of your purpose may be a completely different subject matter, but the purpose, as you said, remains the same. So there is that enduring quality to it, where the flavor of it or the angle of it may change depending on the stage of life, of what's happening around you, your maturity, what's going on. But the enduring component endures, to give myself a tautology. So this whole topic, there is so much pondering on it, but it is so important, as you said, not to get stuck in the pondering. There was a quote that I pulled out the other day that said, "If you're waiting for inspiration to write, you're a waiter, not a writer." And I thought, like, that's perfect. So we need to the message that I'm getting for this as we're bringing our conversation to a close, is that it is good to consider, it is good to explore, it is good to ponder and to feel into what feels as though it's got potential in that realm of purpose. But we have to act. We have to try. We have to see how it feels. We can't wait for purpose to come and smack us between the eyes. We've got to take the action that allows the layers to be pulled off and for that purpose to bubble up and be uncovered.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right, Ange. We do have to take action. But I also think we need to approach it with a sense of fun and adventure.
Yeah.
Curiosity, and just pick one thing, even if it seems really stupid. Just go and do it and have some fun with it. And it starts by, I remember I tell this story about dancing is a passion of mine. I'm really bad at it, but I love it. And I remember the first time that I stepped on the dance floor. There's this thing called 5 rhythms, and you just stand for 2 hours on the dance floor, dancing on your own. There's no steps to follow. You don't talk to anyone. The music goes up and down in tempo as you go through the 2 hours. And the first time I turned up, I thought, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? I look stupid, all the negative self-talk. By the end of it, I was totally in my body and my heart and loved it. And I've been doing it every week since January last, now nearly 18 months. And I could have given it up after the first few weeks because I just felt really self-conscious and uncomfortable. But I bust through and kept going, and now it's become an everyday part of my, a standard part of my week. I have to do it. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say to our listeners is pick that thing that perhaps you loved once that you let go, or that you've always wanted to do, just one thing, and you need to up your action factor and up your courage factor and just keep being curious and doing things that have perhaps you've kind of squashed, and see where it goes. But don't just do it once and go, oh, that wasn't very good, I'm never going back, because that's not learning. That's just, it's not really going to take you to the next level. So whatever that thing is, just give it a go, because we've learned to be voyeurs in this world. We watch TV, we watch sport, we go and watch a play, we watch a movie. We don't actually make movies, we don't act on stage, we don't play sport. We tend to be voyeurs. And so I'd see whatever you're a voyeur at, turn that into what can you act, what could you actually do if you're passionate. Reading's another thing, So yeah, turn voyeurism into actionism. That's totally activism.
I love it. Well, you've heard it here, my lovely listeners. That's what we are charged with when it comes to delving more into this purpose project, into what could become our own next chapters. Turn your voyeurism into actionism, activism. Take inspiration, I think was the word that we were working on before. And Carolyn, this is one of those conversations that could continue forever. This is a topic that is fascinating, it's rich, and it's deep, and it's just so enjoyable to delve into it. But all good things must come to a temporary end as we come to the end of this conversation. So thank you so much for your time. And for our listeners, where can they go in the world to find you? I'll put the links to your books on the podcast page, but just let us know how we can go about connecting and becoming a part of your world.
Thanks, Ange. Thank you so much for the chat.
You're really welcome. So what's the best web address and other connection points for you?
Sorry, Carolyn Tate, CarolynTate .co, not .com, .co.
.co. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we'll be talking again soon, I have no doubt.
Thanks, Ange. Bye.
And you, my lovely listener, I hope this is a conversation that has begun to engender a curiosity within you, a recognition that there is something that is meaningful to you, that you feel will have consequence if you actually do pursue it. Take that inspiration that Carolyn was talking about us about, I'm losing my words at the end of this conversation. My brain is going so busily. But you know what I'm saying here, what we are both saying is that your purpose, it's inside of you, but it doesn't need to wait. You can take those small steps. Stop being a voyeur if that's what you've been doing. Stop being afraid of the opinions of other people and do that thing that's calling to you. Just take a small step today. That's all you need to do to start things moving. I'll put the links, as I mentioned, to Carolyn's wonderful book within the show notes. But there's also a very small step that you could take today. I've created a purpose ebook, which is a part of this whole season of the Your Next Chapter podcast. And if you pop along to angelarasmus.com/purpose, you'll come to the page where you can download that and just begin to turn those thoughts into action so that you can step into your own next chapter. Thank you so much for spending your time here on the podcast today. I appreciate it and you, and look forward to speaking with you again very soon. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelarasmus.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can also enjoy valuable free resources, including show notes and downloads, along with the Next Chapter community, where you can connect with other wholehearted women on the same journey as you. We'd love to welcome and support you as your next chapter unfolds. See you next time.